Welcome to another episode of Chad Sports Talk. He's on my name, Chad. Take a dive on sports. And welcome to my recap of Week 9 of the college football action. I'm going to go over how I did my picks, go over some type of games. Going to throw out probably a couple upsets out there as well. Also go over my updated Eliminator, my new format. I'm kind of doing that one. And then my second edition of my PowerPoint index. I do have to make a correction right now. Last week, Kansas State was not properly ranked. I kind of input some numbers incorrectly, which affected their points overall. That's been rectified. Now they're shot up a lot higher than than probably should have in my normal poll system. But it's a problem when you have some fingers a little bit bigger than others, and then they kind of hit things when you're not trying to look and try to be quick. But anyhow, before I dive into all that, if you could go ahead and give me a thumbs up, especially the content provider, really pleases you two guys. Really helps promote the channel out. You also subscribe. Love you guys review my work. I love you all for doing that. Now, many of you subscribe. It's cost you a dime. Helps me provide more entertainment value for you. Now, recapping last week, I went 7-5. There was a lot of games that didn't go exactly how I thought. Certain teams decided to really show up. When it came to the group of 5 schools, I was less accurate with those programs than with the Power 5 programs. So it's just a weird, funky type of time frame. And there are some games that definitely was like, ooh, WTF. So let's just start this off in Syracuse, shall we? When the Notre Dame came into town to take on 16th ranked Syracuse. And this is the game I went with Syracuse because I did not trust Notre Dame. They did well the previous week, but they had tendencies to do that, to do well one week and then fall back the next week, and they weren't being very consistent. Notre Dame has decided to become consistent. They didn't fall this as a trap game because next week they're taking on Clemson. The defense made the point right away. On the first possession Syracuse had, became a pick 6. That set the tone. Estime was the focal point of the Irish offense. He had over 100 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. And then Syracuse had to go with with another quarterback that as the starter got knocked out, and he had flashes, but it was just something I didn't see coming. I did not see this coming. I thought Syracuse, who took it to Clemson but could not hold on, was going to be way too much for Notre Dame. And there was just too many question marks because Notre Dame has the players in place to do the things they're supposed to be doing, but they weren't executing. I don't know what happened. I really don't. I didn't think Notre Dame had it in them. They proved me wrong. I'm glad they did. I am an Irish fan. And as you can see, a few things here and there for Notre Dame. So I am happy they did it. I was shocked they did it in the way they did it. They were dominating Syracuse. Dominating. 21-7 at the half. I mean, the third quarter, they kind of let up a little bit, but the fourth quarter, they shut the door. They just slammed the door right in Syracuse face. That was it. Notre Dame wins in Syracuse 41-24. Now we have the Lincoln, where the Illini came to town with a key Big Ten West matchup. And even though I picked the Illini in this one, I had a feeling Nebraska could prove to be more of an issue and possibly could upset the Illini, because this is how Illini football is. They always seem to do really well, and then they have like this one game they just completely just fall apart. Maybe they had that early against Indiana. And they started off great. I mean, their first drive, they took it to the house, missed the extra point. And then nothing happened for a while. I mean, they ended being trailing 9-6 until they start scoring touchdowns again. But it's just one of these weird games, really. DeVito was doing just enough. I mean, he didn't have spectacular stats. He didn't have to. He didn't really have to pass a lot. He only had 22 passing attempts for almost 180 yards, but he had two of those went for touchdowns. Chase Brown, who was equivalent of both a receiving and a rushing touchdown, almost had 150 yards on the ground. The Illini defense stepped up and hampered the Cornhuskers offense. They were able to generate some plays and get 9 points overall, but they got shut out that second half. They couldn't do anything correctly. The Illini defense is looking like to be a really a no-joke type of defense that should get Michigan scared, because they still got Michigan later on. But it is just one of these things that Illinois did just enough. They're not flashy. They're not going to run up the score. They're not going to hang up 40 points on you. They're going to do what they had to do. There's still some question marks here and there. They're a little inconsistent sometimes, but they hit the plays. They're executed, and they won 26-9. I mean, it was a no-brainer against it looks like the Cornhuskers, and they're continuing their meteoric rise in the Big Ten West. They still have a key game against Purdue later on. They still got Michigan. They got Michigan State. They got Northwestern. So they have some games that could be some provide some issues. But right now, I think the sky's the limit for the Illini in terms of the Big Ten. Then we head down to Jacksonville for the annual border war between Georgia and Florida, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I mean, it depends on how you want to label this rivalry between the Bulldogs and the Gators. And this is going to be Bulldogs all day long. Not so much. I mean, the first half, it was all Georgia. I mean, it looks like Georgia's going to just run away with this one, scoring 2 touchdowns each quarter. They're up 20-3 at the half. Look like they're going to dominate. It looked like, hey, they were partying around on pace to score 54 points. But then when it came back out of the locker room, Florida actually made it a game and scored 17 unanswered points to get within 8 of Georgia. Then Georgia just shut the door. They're like, no, we ain't playing this game. Bennett had over 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Edwards over 100 yards on the ground, also 2 touchdowns. As Georgia was just toying with the Gators. And beating them 42-20 in pretty much a lopsided affair, which should make for interesting matchups next week. Then we up to Happy Valley, where Penn State, once again having a whiteout, hosting Ohio State, looking trying to rebound. This was kind of their marquee game. And they were actually sticking with the Buckeyes, which is, I think it's typical of these two clash in the Big Ten East. They always tend to play each other pretty well and keep games within reason for majority of the game. This is basically how it was. At the half, Penn State was leading 14-13, which was like, hey, they're probably going to win this one. Well, the explosive fourth quarter, that's all it took. Clifford actually was very phenomenal for the Nittany Lions. He had over 370 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. But it was just a combined effort of the Ohio State offense that really turned the game around. I mean, Henderson, he wasn't very effective, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns. And they poured in 4 touchdowns that fourth quarter to pull away from Penn State, 44-31, to remain undefeated. But that could leave a little mark for Ohio State when it comes to the college football poll, which will be, of course, released the day after I record this video and release it. Then we head over to Knoxville, where we have a key matchup in SEC, where Kentucky came to Rocky Top to take on the Vols in a blackout, wearing all black uniforms. I mean, it was just a ruckus crowd. Hooker had no issues. 245 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. just decimated Kentucky all day long. It was just, he was picking them apart. Hyatt had almost 140 yards receiving with 2 touchdowns. It was a royal beatdown in Knoxville. And Tennessee right now could arguably be the number 1 team in the nation. How they are handling things right now as they routed Kentucky 44-6. But next week in Athens, you will have number 1 Georgia taking on number 2. Yeah, they're tied right now for second, Tennessee. It's going to be a huge matchup in the SEC to determine who is going to be the kings of the East and who could possibly be a playoff team as well if they win out. So keep that in the back of your minds later on in the season, but that's going to make a huge matchup coming up. Next, we'll head up to Ann Arbor, where the in-state rival game between Michigan and Michigan State. And this one is always weird because Michigan State always seems to do the upsets against Michigan. It doesn't matter how it is. And I still go with Michigan because I was like, but because there's just something right now with Michigan State that doesn't seem to be working right now for this year. And it was close early. I mean, it was only 13-7 at half. But Michigan just kept slowly putting on the points. Every so often, not really doing much in terms of being too flashy. They relied a lot on their running attack. Corum had 177 yards on the ground with a touchdown. And it was just miscues on the special teams, which seems to be a recurring theme in this recently between these two. Remember a few years ago, that was a blocked punt and he got run back by Michigan State that created the upset in Ann Arbor. But Michigan was able to hold on and beat Michigan State 29-7. Pretty much the Michigan defense just shut out Michigan for 3 quarters. That's all it was. Then after the game, we had other ruckus and extracurricular activities as videos surfaced of what appeared to be 4 Michigan State players. Looked like to be targeting Michigan players because they seem to go in the same tunnel back to the locker rooms, which I think Michigan, and which is second week of road now in Ann Arbor that you've had teams kind of go at it. But one against Penn State wasn't physical. They were just using sign language. But nope, it actually showed Michigan players actually getting beat up by Michigan State players. And 4 players have now been suspended by Michigan State for their actions during the incident after a Michigan game. Understand you're upset about the loss, but yeah, that's not how you do it. That's not how you handle adversity like that. But congrats to Michigan State for actually handling the situation right away, just suspending those individuals. I don't have the details. I didn't see the details of how long they're out, but they're definitely suspended. Probably further investigation will kind of determine whether or not it'll be a lot longer than that. Then we have to Manhattan, Kansas, where Kansas State were playing host to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was looking to try to rebound from the loss to TCU. The team decided not to show up. I don't know what squad decided to get to play as Oklahoma State, but that wasn't the Cowboys at all. It looked like they got a high school team somewhere. Kansas State took it to them. They took him to the woodshed. Howard almost had 300 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. It's just ridiculous on what was happening. Deuce Vaughn had almost 160 yards on the ground and a touchdown. I mean, Kansas State just dismantled the Cowboys. And it wasn't even close with these two. This is the biggest victory I think Kansas State's had. I think it's like the biggest shutout deficit from like a top 10 team. I mean, Oklahoma State had 0, nada, zilch points put on the board. They look like a JV squad out there. and K-State took it to them 48-0. They more likely eliminated Oklahoma State from the Big 12 picture. But K-State, wow, that was just impressive. And congrats to the Wildcats. But I think they're going to have a nice... If them TCU finish at the end of the year going at each other, I don't think anyone will be disappointed. I really don't. Out to Orlando, where Cincinnati came to town in the key matchup, the American. Kind of determine who's going to be on par with Tulane in terms of at the end of the year. And I went with Cincinnati just because it's just the coaching, and Cincinnati looked pretty well built. I mean, they went toe-to-toe Arkansas for a bit until they just lost at the end. But they could not close out Central Florida, and Central Florida actually used that opportunity, took their opportunities and ran with it in the fourth quarter, just dominating Cincinnati when they had to. And UCF upset Cincinnati 25-21. Totally flipped the American around, and probably put UCF now as the new number 2 in that conference. You still have Cincinnati and Houston right there, all battling behind Tulane for those 2 spots in their championship game. So, who knows? Then we have to Conference USA in Western Kentucky. They're playing host to North Texas. This is one of these games that was going to determine who's going to be the number 2 team right now in Conference USA behind UTSA. And I went with Western Kentucky just because everything pointed to them having good offensive numbers. North Texas came to play. There was no question about that. Owen had 322 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, it was just a phenomenal performance by the North Texas quarterback, and they just took it to them. It was a 20-13 lead at half, but it was a fourth quarter where things just North Texas, the Mean Green, just blew things off the door. Kicked the Hilltoppers on top of the hill and just dominated them that fourth quarter and winning 40-13 to make sure they might have a rematch date with the Roadrunners later on in the year. Then we had the Boise, where the Broncos of Boise State were playing host to the Colorado State, a key match in the Mountain West. The reason why I say key match in the Mountain West, even though Colorado State's record is really poor right now, but their conference record was what played factored in. They came in with a 2-1 conference record. Still in pace possibly to make their case to win the Mountain, but they had to go through Boise State. Boise State wasn't playing any games. It wasn't even close. They were scoring quickly and often. They were up 28-10 at the half. Colorado State didn't even have anything else in the second half. Boise State routed off 21 points in the third quarter. That's all they needed. Green had over 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Holani had over 100 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, as Boise State decimated Colorado State 49-10. They remained undefeated in conference play, moving them to 6-2 overall. You head back to the other mountain range, about east in West Virginia, where Marshall's hosting Coastal Carolina. Now, for me, I was going to go more Marshall just because of how they can operate and step up in big games like they did in South Bend. Somebody forgot to tell them that. They fell behind early. They were down 21-0 after the first quarter. They were playing with that chip on their shoulder, trying to battle back, and they got close, 21-13. That's about as far as they got, and because Coastal Carolina's defense actually stepped up in the second half. Actually, both defenses stepped up after that first quarter. Fancher had 320 yards in the air, but he could never find the end zone. LeBourne only had 1 touchdown on the ground and barely even had much of a rushing attack. It was just a bend-don't-break philosophy by Coastal Carolina. That ensured that they end up winning in Marshall 24-13. Giving me my 5th loss of the day. and made sure Coastal Carolina maintained a 7-1 record overall, 4-1 in conference play. Now to Fresno. In Central Valley, as the Bulldogs playing host to San Diego State in the Battle of the Old Can, which is a recent trophy in their long-running rivalry. And this one was going more towards San Diego State direction. They were just performing well above expectations, just keeping their pace ahead of Fresno State for 3 quarters. I mean, they were up 21-10 in the half, 28-17, heading into the fourth quarter. And that's when things changed, especially towards the end of the game. The end of the game, I think, is probably one of the best football I've seen being played. Hunter had almost 400 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and it was just it included a 37-yard pass to Nico Rumanijo with like 56 seconds left, and giving them within striking distance because they were going for 2 points. Now they're down by 3. So, I mean, that was a methodical drive they were doing before that. I mean, they had plenty of time to work with it. They were just working, giving what the Aztecs were giving them. And they're like, okay, we're going to give you this 6-yard play, maybe this 10-yard play. And they're like, okay, we'll take it. Get moving, getting first downs in college football. This clock stopped momentarily until the stick guys get in position and the clock kicks back in, and then they were off and going again. They were just rapid going and just kept going. Guess I got that huge receiving touchdown, get a 2-point conversion. They're within 3. Onside kick time, which in hindsight, most of the time, you don't win the onside kick. But watching this kick, I mean, I was in shock because like I said, I only caught the tail end of this game, so I was actually shocked at the outcome of this one. The ball is traveling. It bounced, and then as soon as it went in front of the Aztec, it hit the ground and just shot up right over him. And there was no one behind him. And there was a big gap in that section of the receiving team. First day player comes running in there. It's the same one's been doing, had to step up to the plate because of injuries. Got the ball. Recovered the ball. And Fresno State ended up scoring another touchdown to go up to 38-28, and then they just shut out San Diego State, and then just a comeback fashion for the Bulldogs. And I mean, that was a great win, great comeback, exciting football. I mean, if you watch exciting, watch the tail end of that game. That is definitely exciting. Last 5 minutes is probably the best 5 minutes of football you probably watch. I know it's not, the big boys there, but because of the Mountain West, but that was some good football. You showed the tenacity of a team to get back into it. And then that puts them at 3-1. Right now, they're still on top of the Pacific Division because they won a head-to-head matchup against San Jose State, mind you. So that makes things interesting in the Mountain West in terms of who's going to come out of the West. Comparing, and right now, the Mountain looks like it's going to be Boise State. So it could be another Boise State Fresno State rematch, which is always a good matchup for those two programs. But that was that. That's how my Week 9 went 7-5. A few games in the call. I thought I was going to lose that Fresno State game. I was like, oh, great, I'm going to go 500. But that come from behind victory was the chef's kiss. And well, it's time to go into my Eliminator. All right, with my Eliminator, I went away from all the conference tie-ins. I actually broke it down into 2 separate blocks. I had the bubble teams, which is your one-loss group of 5, and then your 2-loss Power 5 schools. So if they get any more wins, they'll get knocked out. And the second one will have a line separating your undefeateds and then your 1-loss teams of the Power 5. So let's go ahead and pull up the bubble teams right there. As you see, there wasn't very many of them left. Their numbers will increase here, I guess you can say. Cincinnati getting upset by UCF ensures that the group of 5 now only has 3 remaining 1-loss teams. This is probably going to be your pool for the New Year's Six bowls. So I don't see them going any further out. Kentucky's embarrassing loss at Rocket Top ensures that they are knocked out, and everyone else here still has 2 losses. Looking at the top half of these Eliminator, the top tier, still all undefeated, still in place, but that Georgia-Tennessee matchup next week will put one team below and probably keep one team still in there, because you still probably have the winner of that game possibly battling Alabama. So you have 3 1-loss SEC schools, and one of them getting left out. But as you see there, the last part of that grouping of Penn State, Oklahoma State, Syracuse, and Wake Forest all losing their game, dropped them to a second loss. So they will be next week the bubble teams being, having their second loss of the season. All of them having decent seasons, to tell you the truth. So update of my PowerPoint or point index poll. I keep calling it PowerPoints. I think that's what I called it last year. I'm now just going to drop to the point index, doing all the points. Like I said, K-State was miscalculated. Probably should have been in the top 25, which means Oregon State would never been in it. But let's just go ahead and start off with the new top 25. Let's start with number 25 was Liberty. They actually fell 4 positions because they didn't play. Just part of the problem with my point index. If you don't play, you do tend to kind of falter a bit. Maryland also slipped to number 24. NC State makes their return to the top 25. Oklahoma State falls to 22. Coastal Carolina now moves up to 21 with their win in Marshall. And Wake dropped to number 20. Probably the biggest drop would be Penn State, going from number 9 to 19. Now, they probably should be ranked a little bit higher overall because they did put up a fight against Ohio State, but because of how this system works, they fell quite hard. LSU maintains number 18. Utah moves up to 20. Syracuse only drops to 16. Because you got to think the strength of schedule and strength of victory do kind of play a factor in this one and who you actually play. K-State comes in there at number 15. Don't look at that previous number. I didn't make any changes to the poll prior to inputting this week's information. So, like I said, theirs is going to be definitely a lot higher, possibly even 25. So, we'll just leave that one there. Tulane shoots up to number 14. Like I said, definitely getting into the running for a New Year's Six bid. North Carolina is at 13, and Illinois is at 12. Both of them make a nice move up, getting closer to that top 10 rankings. UCLA continues to move up to number 11. Now, going into my top 10, you'll have Ole Miss moving up 1 to number 10. Oregon moved up 1 to number 9. Now, looking at my top 8, the top 8 schools don't really change. Just 2 of them kind of flip-flopped. USC's 8, Alabama 7, Tennessee still number 6. I think I'm just waiting for that game against Georgia. I think that's what's going to really turn this poll all on its head, I believe. Michigan's now number 5 with their win against Michigan State. TCU now moves up to number 4 after their shellacking, or after after they just barely got past West Virginia. Georgia maintains 3, Clemson still at 2, and Ohio State still at 1. Like I said, this is just my point index, how I got this all set up. I'll leave down in the comments below exactly how it's ranked, how these things are formulated. It's not really that much of a complex formula. I'm not doing any predictors or anything like that. There's going, okay, this is how it happens. These are the factors come into it. And sometimes it's on par with the rest of the poll. Sometimes there's a little tweaks here and there. But I think last year polling, I had Michigan and Alabama flipped. But everyone else is still in there at the same spot as college football playoff poll is. So there's that one. I mean, it's I think towards the end of the year it's going to be more the same as the other polls. Maybe a few changes here and there, which is typical. But that's just my point index. So, well, there you go. There's my recap, my updated eliminator, and my updated point index. Just let me down below what you think. Which games last week surprised you the most? For me, happily being surprised by Notre Dame win at Syracuse, even though I had no faith in the Irish. That K-State Oklahoma State game was definitely a shocker as well. Which game looking forward to next week? I mean, we have the Georgia-Tennessee matchup coming up. Also, Air Force and Army will be battling for the Commander-in-Chief's trophy for those that actually care about the service academies. Like this guy. Especially for my extended family members at Air Force. Just let me know down below what you think and who you're looking forward to next week. While you're there, ensure you share this video with friends and family. It really helps prompt the video out. You can also hit that thumbs up once again. Once you subscribe, make sure you hit that bell notification until next time I post any more content on my channel. And I will see you next time on Chat Sports Talk.